Welcome to the blog. Today we're going to speak about my book, Your Essential Self. In 2002, I just finished writing The Flight of Consciousness, which was my first internationally published book. And that was quite an ordeal for me, and once it was released, I myself felt a great release. So no one was as surprised as I was when immediately, seamlessly, I launched into writing another book. And this book would take me several years. A Flight of Consciousness arguably took a few years, but the next book took many years to write, and it eventually became entitled Human Awakening. It was, I think, something in the region of approaching 200,000 words, and this at a time when I wasn't particularly conscious of the publishing industry and the uniform way in which books are presented, which amounts to 80,000 words or maybe 60 for a shorter book. But there was no way that I was going to get 200,000 word manuscript published in book form. So I was fortunate, blessed enough to get a good reading from Llewellyn Worldwide, the American publishers, who suggested they were interested in the book, but I would have to chop it down, take about half of the material out, which I set about doing in a sometimes clearly informed sort of a way, because I recognized there were several perspectives in the book, and one of the things I did was take out the therapist or the guide or the teacher's perspective. That was quite easy. This seemed to me to be a separate sort of aspect of the book. But then that still left me with something like 120, 130,000 words, and I carried on culling the book until I got it chopped down to about 85. And not to labour this, that wasn't going to do for the publishers. They said, no, it's got to be 80. So I managed to take something else out. And eventually we had an 80,000 word manuscript, whereupon I had a really pleasurable, intense, hard-working period of time in refining that book and adding a great deal of material, in particular the exercise sections, in particular some of the introductory parts, and perhaps most particularly the short chapter on inner work practice, which I had kind of taken for granted, really. You'd be able to work out how to work with this material, but of course that's not fair, and it's not really by any means always the case. So it was instructive for me, and it's proved helpful. It's possibly the part of the book that I've most recommended over the years to people when they say, well, how do you do this? How do you work psychospiritually? How do you establish the discipline? What are the pieces you have to put in place? So I had covered all of that in the chapter in the work practice, which hadn't been my initiative, but I'm so glad it's in there. The book was touted as Human Awakening, but I was asked to present a list of alternative titles for the Llewellyn people to consider in a decision-making group, along with the title would be the cover and the presentation, all this kind of thing. And we settled on Your Essential Self. Now, people who know of my work may understand that this proved to be, although I didn't know it at the time, the beginning of 3 psychospiritual books, which would more or less, in some senses loosely, but in some senses quite relevantly, cover the 3 stages of awakening on which sacred attention therapy training is based. So in that sense, your essential self turned out to be the first of a trilogy, and the second is your sacred calling, and the third is the yet to be published and almost completed book, Your Divine Opportunity. So this is a trilogy of books all using the possessive pronoun your at the beginning. Your essential self looks like this. 80,000 word book looks like this. And I think I'd like to just read you a little piece from the prologue to give you a taste, and particularly if you're not familiar with my work, the work of the Centre for Human Awakening and sacred attention therapy work in general. This part of the prologue is subtitled, What is Your Essential Self? Awakening to your essential self is an idea that has been around since human history began. It can be found in most or all religious and spiritual traditions, as well as modern New Age thinking. Simply put, it is the idea that human birth is a paradoxical experience. On the one hand, we grow, mature and adapt to become part of the human world. On the other, through the indoctrination of conditioning, we forget where we have come from and who or what we really are. So being born is awakening into this world, but falling asleep to a deeper reality. This book is about how we can awaken to our essential self in this lifetime and live to our full capacity and potential as a human being. Human beings are animalistic, compassionate and divine, infinitely more splendid, amazing and diverse than we could ever imagine. Most of us spend our lives in the first level, the animalistic level. Sometimes we may rise to the second level and truly love and feel compassion. Fewer still make the heart the abiding center of their lives, and even rarer is the human being who longs for the truth, for the eternal, and for the divine, and who sees human life as a unique and precious opportunity for discovering the divine being that inheres within the psychic body form. Human beings mostly live at a fraction of their full potential. Try as we might, money, relationships, possessions, and prestige cannot fill the inner void. Potential and fulfillment, like satisfaction and joy, must be authentic, must be real. In fact, they must be inner. We have a deep integrity about life and a great curiosity. Human beings have been questioning and questing for thousands of years. At the forefront of their field of interest is the search for their true nature, for something that is deathless. Some call it God, or Brahman, Allah, Yahweh, Great Spirit. It is changeless, omnipotent, omniscient and immanent, more here than we are. And it is our human destiny to awaken to it. Your essential self is presented in three parts. The first part is more or less half of the book, and it covers the exploration of the self, the exploration of the psyche, or what those of us who've been involved in psychotherapy may know as personal therapy, that whole material of our self-identification, separation, and our difficulties with the inner conflicts of that. Second part of the book proposes a second and connective stage between the human and the spiritual, and it's called the second stage of awakening. The third stage is the spiritual stage, and it covers in some amount of description and detail the spiritual perspective on life. So it's a truly psycho-spiritual book, but perhaps what distinguishes it is in its connecting the psychological realms to the spiritual realms. You may have read it. If you have, I and others have suggested you read it more than once. 3 times is useful. We say that because people read more into, they understand more of the deeper meanings of the book through the second and third readings. Sometimes the third part is a little difficult, in which case I would say concentrate on the first part of the book. And when you've read this, by all means progress or go on to the obvious furthering of knowledge in psycho-spiritual realms, which is your sacred calling. So if you're interested in this book, it's on the books page, the link on the Center for Human Awakening website, which is underneath this presentation here on our YouTube channel. And we're always interested to hear your thoughts, your feelings, if you enjoyed the book, if it's been helpful. That's Your Essential Self.